Welcome to Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy and Tia Mitchell. It's a packed house for one of our favorite episodes, Monday Mailbag. Hey, guys.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Tia.
Hello.
Hope you guys had a great weekend. Shani B., you have been diving through dozens of emails, lots of messages. Some folks are even texting on our hotline. Also, you've got some calls. Give us like the best couple to start us out.
Man, we've had to have the phone company install more lines. It's overwhelming. And my interns are really tired. But thank you so much for keeping them busy. Let's start with a text message from Amy, who writes, I keep hearing politicians talk about the Democratic coalition or the Republican base. Who actually makes up these groups in Georgia right now, and how much have they changed since 2020?
They've changed a lot since 2020. They've changed a lot since 2016, right? The Democratic coalition used to be, basically an urban core, mostly African-American, still is mostly African-American, but you sort of there's about 30% or so white liberal base. But we've seen with the advent of Donald Trump, the suburbs that used to be solid red, especially around, the inner suburbs of Metro Atlanta, have gone from bright red to kind of pinkish to light blue to now pretty much bright blue. So that has really been the main contributing factor to Georgia becoming the premier battleground state, Patricia.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the Republican base, I think that has changed accordingly. So when we look back to the days of kind of Newt Gingrich, those inner suburbs were Republican strongholds. Cobb, Gwinnett, absolutely dominant in the Republican Party. Now the Republican base, certainly the bulk of their voters come from outside metro areas. When you look at a map of Georgia, it's like red and then chunks of blue in the more metro counties. So, and I think the base has become less and less about being conservative and more about being pro-Trump, even being America first is no longer the bar that it used to be. It's really just about supporting President Trump and his policies and his candidates and going along with all of that and buying into that. The big question in Georgia since 2020 has been who does not count among the Democratic coalition and the Republican base. Who's left? What does that look like? Are they ticket splitters? The answer for the last 3 cycles has been yes. So every statewide candidate just about this year is looking not so much at their base or their coalition. Of course, they have to get them out to the polls. The question is that chunk in the middle, who are the Warnock-Kemp voters? Are there going to be Ossoff blank voters once we figure out who that Republican nominee is going to be?
I do think if you consider yourself a very conservative Christian, particularly if you're a white conservative Christian, if you consider yourself someone who the culture wars are extremely important to your politics, you're still a Republican, even if Donald Trump isn't your favorite. And we're seeing a lot of that with, the rise of the Christian nationalist movement, as well as, quite frankly, white evangelical churches. But even Black evangelicals tend to lean towards Republicans, even if they don't consider themselves Trump Republicans. So that was an important coalition that Donald Trump took advantage of in 2024, particularly when he talked about he appealed to Black male voters and Latino male voters in ways that closely aligned with some of the talking points of conservative Christianity and Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. And so that's weird because it is kind of indicative of where the Republican Party wants to keep those voters, but Donald Trump at times turns them off. And that's why we've seen, particularly with the Latino men and Black men, Donald Trump hasn't been able to keep them on board. They've been much more willing to swing back towards Democrats.
I have my own question to add to this too, which is kind of building off of what you guys just said. Are we seeing the death of the mainstream Republican candidate in Georgia? Governor Kemp, he's term limited. You saw a lot of the more mainstream Republicans go down in flames in the Georgia primaries. The folks in the runoffs, for the most part, are very pro-Trump, very, very pro-MAGA. They look at the governor's runoff as the key example. Like Trump endorsed Burt Jones, but Rick Jackson's out there saying he'd be Trump's favorite governor. And like the one sort of iconoclast out there. The one candidate who is still sort of the mainstream's biggest voice seems to be Derek Dooley. But here he is with just Governor Kemp's endorsement as his strongest point. If he didn't have Kemp's endorsement, would he have made it this far?
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to what that base looks like. And that really matters so much in these Republican primaries. Like, what's the flavor that is catching on? It really just feels very, very pro-Trump. So for somebody like Derek Dooley, it's going to be convincing them, yes, I can be pro-Trump and I can win in November. That's when that electability argument starts getting put forward. And again, it's for those swing voters, those majority makers who can get you up to 49. Now we're up to 51.
JDB, what else do we got?
Next is an email from Bill, who shared an article from the May 24th AJC. And that article says, the Department of Justice is acknowledging it's removed from its website news releases about criminal cases related to the January 6th riot. The department says the information about the prosecutions is partisan propaganda. So Bill's question, who will save this and other parts of our history so our kids and grandkids can get a balanced look at our history?
Tia, this is right up your alley.
Yeah, I mean, number one, Bill, you're looking at it. It's journalism, and that's why independent journalism that is not partisan or tilting one way or the other, we're just about the truth, will be here. And no, there is no longer a printed AJC, but we still have AJC.com. We still have the e-newspaper, and we still have our archives that are going to be around forever, God willing. So that's important. I think it'll also be important how future administrations, when I'm talking about future presidents, how they deal with some of the efforts under Trump's second term to rewrite history, whitewash history. Do they restore the data and the historical files? Do they restore those things that Trump has tried to get rid of? Does Congress put in place better safeguards to prevent future presidents from just unilaterally trying to rewrite and whitewash history? These are things that I think we'll see in the years after Trump leaves the White House. For example, after January 6th and what happened with January 6th, Congress passed new laws in hopes of preventing another attempt to block the certification of an election because they took lessons from January 6th. Will Congress take lessons from Trump 2.0 and try to preserve our history in ways that maybe they hadn't thought about before Trump returned to the White House?
Janie B., what else we got?
Next is an email from Paul, The Tyranny of the Majority, Fundamental Fairness in Representative Democracy, by the late Harvard law professor Lonnie Guinier, led me to investigate alternative voting methods that allow minorities of all types to elect representatives without creating minority-majority districts. The gold standard is called proportional ranked choice voting, or single transfer voting. It involves the creation of multi-seat districts and ranked choice voting. It works. It can be found in H.R. 4632, the Fair Representation Act. If it's not too late, please ask Senator Warnock if he is interested in sponsoring a similar bill in the Senate.
This is a debate we've had in Georgia for a very long time. I'm looking actually at a story that we ran in November of a couple of years ago saying if we had ranked choice elections in Georgia, we'd be done voting this year because that was one of the years we had November runoffs and ongoing battles over who should get a majority of the vote. This is something that, frankly, both parties aren't in love with because both parties have benefited at different times with the runoff system, right? We wouldn't have a Senator John Ossoff right now, for instance, without the runoff system. And we certainly wouldn't have some of our Republican leaders without a runoff system. So this has gone back and forth a lot. But the ranked choice proponents say it would be a lot cleaner if we just had ranked choice and you could end up tallying the second place, victories pretty quickly.
I feel like it's always an uphill climb to get people elected under one system to change that system to something else that they might not get elected under. The rules worked for them, and the new rules might not work for them under a new scenario. So I'm always super, super skeptical of something like this. I think not something like that, like ranked choice. I'm not skeptical of ranked choice voting. I'm skeptical about the idea of Georgia lawmakers. It would need to be a state law rather than a federal law to change how Georgia votes. They don't ever seem inclined to make big changes except to their districts and to make them more safe, not less safe. I do also think that the idea of protecting minority rights is something that has really gotten lost in the conversation about redistricting. Not lost, but there was a day when protecting minority voices and giving an opportunity for minority voices was seen as beneficial to both sides. And now it is just so much about partisanship and power. That's the name of the game. So I think I've talked to so many lawmakers who are absolutely dreading redistricting coming up. I think that's the kind of changes we'll be seeing. And then in terms of just the general electorate, you see more and more skepticism about voting machines, voting standards, who's making the decisions about these. And I think people are looking for literally hand-marked paper ballots so that they can guarantee to themselves that the vote they cast is the vote that is counted. Introducing new systems, new ways to count, I think risks giving either side a chance to really kick up doubt about future election results, which is super dangerous to me.
Yeah, the Supreme Court ruling has only sort of injected even more partisanship into all these races. And look, I've talked to Republicans too who are worried about this redistricting session. They're worried it could backfire and end up not necessarily losing seats, but they worry that in this coming election it's going to energize Republican voters. Also, though, they're not, at least as of yet, raising their hands to try to stop it.
Yeah, and so much, I was talking with some Democrats. They're like, Governor Kemp keeps saying they're complaining, but they haven't seen the maps. But, nobody's seen the maps. So everybody's, waiting to see how bad it's going to be or where could the toss-up seats be. But at the end of the day, ranked choice voting is it's just not tenable, especially right now with Republicans in control. Republicans, yes, both parties kind of have their questions about ranked choice voting, but the Republican Party is dead set against it. And Republicans right now control Georgia. There's just no way to get it done. At a federal level, it wouldn't matter because guess what? States control voting. Yes, there could be federal standards, but it would be very hard for Congress to force states to do voting a certain way. They can try to incentivize states, but it would be very hard for the federal government to force states to do anything in particular with voting because, again, the Constitution says the administration of elections is left up to states.
Got it. Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about the Ossoff Bottoms Tandem ticket, the power of the black woman vote, and we're going to explain election bunkers. This is Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Welcome back to our Monday mailbag episode of Politically Georgia. Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy and Tia Mitchell, and executive producer Shani B is in the control room. If you've got a question you'd like to ask us here on Politically Georgia, you can call our hotline anytime, day or night. Leave a question. We'll play it back and answer your question right here on the show. The number is 770-810-5297. Producer Shani B is standing by waiting for your messages. PoliticallyGeorgia@ajc.com as well. Shani B, what else we got?
We got an email from Denise in Marietta who writes, I feel like John Ossoff and Keisha Lance Bottoms are already campaigning together before Republicans even finish their runoffs. Is that normal?
Yeah, Tia, the short answer is it's normal for Ossoff. He did it with Senator Warnock, but it's not necessarily that normal in Georgia politics. Stacey Abrams and Raphael Warnock certainly did not campaign together to the point where when they did campaign and had like one or two events together, it was news, right? We all like kind of dropped everything and made sure we were in Marietta for that big event. I remember it still to this day back in 2022. Nathan Deal, David Perdue didn't campaign together. You didn't really see, near the end you saw David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler campaign together, but certainly not in the first phase of that race. And you can go back in Georgia history and you can see some examples of tandem tickets, but you can see lots of examples of fellow Republicans and fellow Democrats going their own merry way separately.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to the fact that sometimes it makes sense when two candidates can feed off each other. You know, we talked about Ossoff and Warnock. They formed a good team because Ossoff helped insulate Warnock, I think, a little bit from the radical liberal description that his opponents try to put on him. And Warnock, of course, helped Ossoff appeal to Black voters. And I think perhaps a similar dynamic could be coming for Ossoff and Bottoms. You know, Warnock and Stacey Abrams didn't have that kind of crossover appeal. You know, I don't think, to be honest, if Warnock was looking at an Abrams campaign, there were a lot of upsides because he didn't need help speaking to Black voters. And he knew that she was kind of running as a deficit because she was running against an incumbent. And also at that point, her popularity was lagging a little bit. So I think there were some strategic reasons why a Warnock-Abrams kind of coalition didn't form back in 2022, for example. It has to be mutually beneficial, I guess, is my part.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's what's mutually beneficial. We also saw Governor Kemp did not campaign with Herschel Walker until did they ever campaign together, actually?
The very
end.
Doing the runoff phase.
Yes. And I remember even when we asked Governor Kemp at the end of 2022, when are you going to campaign with Herschel Walker? He said, well, we're running our own races. And it was very clearly because Herschel Walker was also running at a deficit. So as it's kind of like two balloons. If they're both flying at the same level, then there's a lot of benefit to both. If one of them is significantly higher or lower, they're not going to tether themselves to whoever is lower than they are. It's just about survival at a certain point.
I just looked it up, November 19th, 2022. So it was well after the general election for Kemp endorsing Herschel. He didn't say anything bad about Herschel Walker, but he definitely wanted to keep his campaign separate for obvious reasons. There was that entire Kemp-Warnock split ticket vote that ended up deciding that election. Sheenie B, what else we got?
Next is a text from Rich. Can you all explain what this fight over the election bunker actually is? Some Republicans are making it sound shady, but others say votes aren't even counted there. What's really going on?
Patricia, you've been to the bunker.
So, Rich, I've been to the bunker. The bunker is a part of the State Emergency Operations Center. It is a state property. Votes are not tabulated there. Votes are tabulated at the county level, and votes are specifically counted by the counties. It is a place, though, for the Secretary of State and his staff to monitor what's happening around the state as it's happening. And so they have a huge kind of troubleshooting screen monitoring every single precinct and every single voting location around the state. If any of the wait times get over 15 minutes, they'll place a call to that voting location and say what's going on. And so there's a lot of information that is followed there, but it's not specifically where the race is decided. However, when I was there on election night 2024, it is where Brad Raffensperger came out to a press conference and said the votes have been counted. And he was very early to call President Trump the victor in 2024. But reporters had limited access. We were in a press room. I was able to interview Raffensperger and his staff in a conference room, but there is an entire area that is considered kind of super sensitive, and you have to have a sort of security clearance to go back there. So there are parts of it that are unseen by sort of like your typical civilians, but there was a big fight during the campaign, especially toward Election Day, over who should have access to see exactly what's on those screens and all of that sensitive information, which you were following carefully.
Also goes to show you, too, that when there is sort of this, you can just make it sound secretive and you can make it sound like something nefarious is going on, even though it's been standard procedure for a long time. And even though reporters like you have had access to it before. And next time I should go to the bunker as well.
You should.
Just to experience what Patricia Murphy experienced when she went to go. What was it, 2024, you said?
Yeah.
Shani B, what else we got?
Next is an email from Franklin in South Fulton. You all talked a lot this week about Black women driving Democratic turnout again. Why does that coalition stay so powerful in Georgia politics?
For lots of reasons. I was going to say Tia Mitchell. Here, you know what? Take that whole thing.
As a Black woman who votes, no, I'm joking. I mean, yes, I'm a Black woman who votes. But I mean, I think that Black women have shown it's not just that they are pretty unified in their political leanings. So Black women vote overwhelmingly for Democratic candidates. So they're a very reliable voting bloc. But I also think Black women in recent elections have become a very consistent voting bloc. They actually show up to the polls. They show up consistently. And so that is another reason why, particularly for Democratic candidates, you cannot ignore them. And I think what we saw from the results from the primary is that it's not just that Black women are looking to support Democrats, which they overwhelmingly do. I mean, we're talking about the high 90 percentile. Black men too, but Black women are a little bit more consistent voters and again, more educated. But Black women also like to support other Black women on the ballot if they think those Black women are aligned with them politically. Because let me give you a case in point. Misha Maynor. Black women didn't vote for her. So it's not all Black women. Hashtag not all Black women. But when they think there's a Black woman candidate on the ballot who is aligned with them politically, Black women tend to really, really support them and really help invigorate their campaigns.
That's a good point about Misha Maynor. Our friend Fred Hicks, a Democratic strategist, said it wasn't just a wave, it was a tsunami of Black women support out there that really swamped judicial candidates, particularly in Fulton County, Superior Court, state court judges, incumbents losing, and certainly up the ticket. You saw, I mean, Keisha Lance Bottoms wins the nomination outright. Other Black, Tanya Miller, swamps his opponent. I mean, there was a lot of evidence out there. Certainly you had strong Black women candidates who had very strong campaigns that helped. But there was a tsunami.
Yeah. Tia, do you think that there is any danger of Black women being discouraged in November because Kamala Harris didn't win, because Stacey Abrams has run twice and not won? Do you feel like that is energizing, or is there any danger that Black women can be like, ugh, again, the Democrats are asking me to do this again, and maybe they don't feel like the party has been supportive enough of those women?
So I think Black women feel that way. But what I think are starting to see is that they still go, but I'm gonna take my rest, which a lot of Black women did after the 2024 campaign. But now they're saying it's time to get back out there. It's time to cast my vote. It's time to try to make a difference. I think the frustration about Stacey Abrams and Kamala Harris are part of the reasons why Black women are going hard for Keisha Lance Bottoms. And we're going to see that this year. And if Keisha Lance Bottoms is not successful, I think there will be some Black women voters who are disappointed, particularly if they think Keisha ran a strong campaign. Now, that being said, again, it is not absolute. If Keisha Lance Bottoms does not run a strong campaign, let me be clear with y'all. There are plenty of Black women who were not supportive of Keisha Lance Bottoms' campaign. Clearly not enough to, hurt her. But Keisha Lance Bottoms has some cleaning up to do with her base, including some Black women who have concerns about the way she handled her tenure as mayor. And if she doesn't come across that she's listening and learning, I think that could even affect support from particularly some Black women in Metro Atlanta. We've had the maps that showed the parts of Atlanta where Keisha Lance Bottoms was not as strong. So again, it's not an absolute thing, but if Keisha Lance Bottoms does run a strong campaign, I think there are Black women who will be disappointed, but that may mean that they take a step back. I don't think that means they're gone forever.
Shady, I think we have time for one more.
All right, let's wrap it up with Sarah in Athens. Democrats are trying to build energy before Republicans finish their runoffs. Does having a long runoff actually hurt the Republican Party in November, or can it sometimes help by keeping voters engaged?
Yeah, I've heard it being called a two-edged sword because it's going to just sharpen the candidates even more, and it's going to you're not going to be able to get out of the next 4 weeks without hearing more about Burt Jones and more about Rick Jackson. But of course, there's going to be a lot of negativity, right? Derek Dooley and Mike Collins, they're going after each other. John Ossoff told me at a campaign event, he goes, I'm surprised that Donald Trump hasn't stepped in earlier and ended this thing by endorsing one or the other, right? It just, it does bring it. It's not a 9-week runoff like it used to be. We had that January 5th election that was after even the Senate was seated back in 2021. I mean, it was just, that went on forever. You don't have that anymore. But 4 weeks is still a long, grueling path.
It's a long, grueling path. It's also plenty of time for something to blow up that you really would rather not. And because these, particularly in the governor's race, these two campaigns are so personally offended by the other one, they are going to bring out everything they've got. They are leaving nothing on the field. They will bring every negative attack that they can find under any old rock that they need to look. So I think the longer it goes on, the more potential damage it can do to the campaigns that are running. You would love to just do it, be done, move on, start focusing on your Democratic opponent, start raising money for that race. The sooner they can get out of this with a win, the better, unless you're Derek Dooley, because you would love for this to go up a little bit longer because he had some upward momentum on his way into primary day. And I feel like the Dooley campaign thinks they would like more time to let that trajectory grow.
See, it's also exhausting for voters who have to go back to the polls, 4 or 5 times a year, depending on where you live. And also, of course, depending on if there's going to be a November, if there's going to be a runoff after the November election, which is also a big question, if the Libertarian candidates can even qualify to run.
Right. I mean, voters vote a lot in Georgia because of our runoff system, because of constant special elections as well. That is why, we talked before about people wanting ranked choice voting and things that aren't necessarily going to happen, but it's because there is voter fatigue. I think we should point out we used to have longer runoffs, and then that changed after Ossoff and Warnock were so successful. They had a long runoff runway, 2 months.
9 weeks.
Yeah, no.
9-week runoff.
Including Christmas and New
9-week
Year's.
runoff.
Went over New Year's and Christmas.
Horrific.
And the New Year.
It went so long, David Perdue's term was up before his replacement was elected. And so his seat was just vacant for a couple of weeks. But that is no more because Republicans said we can't let these long runoff periods happen because Democrats took advantage.
You were exactly right about that long runoff being even more exhausting. Imagine, as exhausted as we are, imagine another 9-week runoff.
God.
Well, that's going to do it for today's edition of Politically Georgia. If you enjoyed what you heard, please follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform and share Politically Georgia with a friend. It helps others find the show and join the conversation. We'll talk to you next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thanks for listening to the Politically Georgia podcast. Our executive producer is Shane Backler. AJC's head of audio is Sam Stamler. Production support from our partners at Goat Rodeo, including Kara Schillen, Hazel Hoffman, and Max Johnston. For more of our political coverage, visit ajc.com/politicallygeorgia, and we invite you to support local journalism by subscribing to the AJC. Join us again next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.